I had a little bit of virtual bacon and virtual eggs this morning to start the day off, but there was no virtual smell of bacon in the room.
Some dad jokes there to begin the morning. And oh man, that's too bad because nothing says breakfast like the smell of bacon. A breakfast update from Governor Little. A lot different than the oatmeal we made with him 2 years ago. That was before a lot of things went virtual, though. This time around, a virtual breakfast with the governor. Like usual, though, Governor Little answered questions for about an hour during this annual event. Chief political reporter Joe Paris was lucky to get a seat at the table this morning and joins me now. Joe, we've heard a lot about these topics, or a topic we heard a lot about, I should say. We'll get to that in a second about election laws. But what about when it comes to things like voter IDs and absentee ballots? You guys talked about a lot of these things.
Yeah, it really, a common question for Governor Little today, Brian, was about the election bills because they all have emergency clauses in them, meaning that they would go into effect immediately. And we've seen text messages and calls from you at home saying, we don't think this is fair for the legislature to change the rules right before the election would start, and would Idahoans even know about it? So we asked the governor, and he reacted. This is how Little feels on the idea.
It does concern me that you change the rules and that a whole bunch of the electorate would not be aware of that change. And we'll see what happens. I generally don't comment until I see the bills up here. Depends what happens on them, what gets amended. But I am concerned about changing the rules.
Specifically, would you have hesitations about signing these bills? And would you maybe have a qualifier that you would only sign these bills if they did not have an emergency clause?
I don't think they're very close yet. We'll look at them when they get closer. But like I said, the emergency clause changes the rules awful close to the time of implementation. And of course, depends upon where they are in the process. But in fact, again, if we're going to talk about litigation, if you change the rules, within a few days of when something's going to happen, you can bet that somebody will litigate on it also.
Couldn't the whole situation be avoided, though, if you set the expectation for lawmakers that it would be unfair to voters if they passed this with an emergency clause?
Well, I think you're all making this case right now.
And I can see that.
Yeah, so we kind of made the point for the governor. Now, another topic that we've seen sent into our text line and our newsroom, it's about the grocery tax. Brian, we've heard a lot about the grocery tax. State House leaders tell me that they, too, are hearing from Idahoans that want to see the grocery tax repealed. And Governor Little has been a part of this conversation for a number of years, as governor, of course, as lieutenant governor, and the member of the legislature. And he pointed out that there are some issues and clarity that need to be solved before you could even approach appealing the grocery tax.
When you go to the grocery store, everything you buy there, is that exempt or is it just food? And that's what I've said from the get-go. You got to define what you're exempting. There's food, and then there's groceries, and then what are groceries, which is a problem that exists in quite a few of the states. And then once after you say what groceries are, what do you do about people who want to say, well, we want to be groceries? Right now, if you buy cold chicken, you're exempt, but if you buy hot chicken, it's not. And there's a lot of other things that are encompassed in that. You can talk to the retailers about it. But if we could agree what food is and it didn't disrupt the budget too much, I think but every day that goes by, it gets a little more difficult unless our revenue continues to keep going up on what looks like a consistent basis.
So the governor seems open to the idea, but there's some clarification that needs to be made. We'll see if that happens this session, but if you read between the lines, sounds like maybe not. And we also, though, today get a juicy little tease on the all-day kindergarten topic. There are a few pieces of legislation right now floating around the State House that touch on funding optional full-day kindergarten for Idahoans. Lawmakers, though, they need to fund it, and Little made it sound like a deal is close.
My big issue is I want these kids reading proficiently, and I know that kindergarten's a big part of it. But I want to make sure there's resources there so these kids that, because it's still optional kindergarten, these kids that don't go to kindergarten, that the schools have adequate resources to help those kids get caught back up. And we are having fruitful discussions with the legislature about that very issue. There was a meeting in here that I was part of yesterday afternoon, And again, I spoke to some of the legislators last night. We're getting awful close to a pretty good consensus.
The governor was pushed on a follow-up question, specifically, what do you think this looks like, and when could a deal be made? He didn't really go into details there, but again, Brian, if you read between the lines, it looks like the funding of all-day kindergarten, optional all-day kindergarten, could happen as soon as this year.
Overall, it looks like we kind of left that virtual breakfast still a little hungry for more, I think. At least I did. I don't know. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Virtual bacon doesn't fill you up.
No.